They say trust is the foundation of every home. But what happens when that trust becomes the very weapon used to destroy you? This is the story of the Okafors, a family that had everything: wealth, respect, influence, until one woman walked through their gates and dismantled their lives piece by piece. And the most terrifying part? No one saw it coming. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure you hit that subscribe button because the twists in this tale will leave you speechless, and you don't want to miss what happens next. The Okafor mansion stood tall in the heart of Lekki Phase 1, a testament to Chief Raymond Okafor's success. He wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful, a real estate mogul whose name opened doors across Lagos and beyond. His wife, Amara, was the perfect complement. Elegant, educated, and deeply involved in charity work that made her a beloved figure in their community. Together, they had 3 children: Chidi, their firstborn and heir apparent to the family business; Ngozi, a medical doctor studying abroad; and little Emeka, the unexpected blessing who came 10 years after Ngozi. Everything about the Okafors screamed perfection. Sunday church services where they sat in the front row, lavish parties where Lagos elite mingled, family photos that graced the pages of society magazines. But perfection, as you'll soon learn, is often just an illusion waiting to shatter. It started innocuously enough in March 2019. The Okafor's previous housemaid, Patience, had returned to her village for her mother's burial and decided to stay back to care for her younger siblings. Amara needed help, especially with young Emeka, who was just 8 years old and required constant supervision. Managing a 12-bedroom mansion, coordinating staff, and maintaining her social obligations was becoming overwhelming. That's when Grace appeared. Grace Adeleke came with impeccable references. 28 years old, soft-spoken, and remarkably well-mannered. She had worked for 2 prominent families in Abuja before relocating to Lagos, or so her story went. During the interview, she impressed Amara with her intelligence and her understanding of how affluent households operated. She could cook continental dishes, spoke decent English, and most importantly, she seemed trustworthy. Amara's instincts, honed over years of dealing with household staff, told her Grace was different. What Amara didn't know was that Grace had spent 6 months researching the Okafor family before even applying for the position. She knew Chief Okafor's business patterns, Amara's charity schedule, Chidi's weaknesses, and every single detail that could be weaponized. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to how it all unfolded. The first 3 months were perfect. Grace was everything Amara had hoped for and more. She woke up before everyone else, prepared breakfast exactly how each family member liked it, kept the house spotless, and most remarkably, she bonded with young Emeka in a way that warmed Amara's heart. The boy, who had been difficult since Patience left, suddenly became cheerful again. He would rush home from school excited to see Auntie Grace and share his day with her. Chief Okafor, who rarely noticed household staff, actually complimented Grace one morning. "Amara, this one is a keeper. Not like those other ones who were always causing problems," he said, savoring the perfectly prepared ofada rice and stew. Amara beamed with pride. She had made an excellent choice, or so she thought. But Grace was playing a long game, and her real plan was only beginning to take shape. By June, Grace had become indispensable. She anticipated needs before they were voiced, resolved household issues before they escalated, and most dangerously, she had positioned herself as the confidant to different family members. Emeka told her things he wouldn't tell his parents. Chidi, the 26-year-old heir who still lived at home while learning the family business, began having casual conversations with her about his frustrations with his father's controlling nature. This is where Grace's brilliance became evident. She never offered advice or opinions. She simply listened, nodded sympathetically, and remembered everything. Every complaint, every secret, every moment of vulnerability. She cataloged it all like a lawyer building a case. The first crack appeared in July, but it was so subtle that no one connected it to Grace. Chief Okafor's business partner of 15 years, Alhaji Musa, suddenly withdrew from a major project they were developing in Ikoyi. The partnership dissolution was messy, filled with accusations of financial impropriety. Chief Okafor was blindsided. Documents that should have been confidential appeared in Alhaji Musa's possession. Emails that Chief Okafor had never sent were produced as evidence of bad faith negotiations. The fallout was spectacular. The project collapsed, taking with it over 200 million naira of Chief Okafor's investment. Worse, the scandal damaged his reputation. Whispers began circulating in business circles. Maybe Chief Okafor wasn't as trustworthy as everyone thought. At home, the stress was palpable. Chief Okafor became irritable, snapping at Amara over minor issues. The perfect family was showing cracks, and Grace watched it all with quiet satisfaction. Because she was the one who had orchestrated the entire thing. You see, Grace had accessed Chief Okafor's home office, a sacred space where even Amara rarely ventured, by offering to clean it while he was away on a business trip. She had photographed documents, copied files from his personal laptop when he left it unlocked, and even recorded conversations using a small device hidden in the bookshelf. All of this information had been carefully leaked to Alhaji Musa through an anonymous email account. But why? What could a housemaid possibly gain from destroying a business relationship? Hold on, because the answer is more twisted than you can imagine. In August, the second blow landed. Chidi was arrested. The young Okafor heir was picked up by EFCC operatives at a nightclub in Victoria Island. The charges: money laundering and fraudulent land transactions. The evidence against him was damning. Bank transfers, forged documents, and testimony from alleged co-conspirators. Chief Okafor used every connection he had to secure bail, spending millions on legal fees and settling debts to make the case go away quietly. But the damage to the family's reputation was catastrophic. Society began withdrawing invitations. Business associates became suddenly unavailable. The Okafors were becoming pariahs, and they couldn't understand why everything was falling apart simultaneously. Amara noticed something during this period. Grace never seemed stressed by the chaos. While everyone else in the household was frantic, Grace remained calm, almost serene. It should have been a red flag, but Amara was too overwhelmed to process it. Instead, she became more dependent on Grace, who was the only one keeping the household running smoothly amid the crisis. This is exactly what Grace wanted. September brought the most devastating blow yet. Amara discovered she was being investigated for charity fraud. The NGO she had founded and run for 8 years was accused of embezzling donations meant for orphanages. Receipts were falsified, money had been diverted to personal accounts, and donors were demanding answers. Amara was innocent, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Her signature appeared on documents she had never seen. Bank accounts she didn't know existed were opened in her name. The media, which had once celebrated her philanthropic work, now tore her apart. "Society wife's secret shame," read one headline. "Behind the designer bags, a story of greed," proclaimed another. The family was in absolute ruins. Chief Okafor's business was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Chidi was facing criminal charges. Amara was being investigated and publicly humiliated. And through it all, young Emeka watched his family disintegrate, clinging to the only stable presence in his life, Auntie Grace. But the final act of Grace's plan was still to come, and it would break the Okafors completely. It was late October when Amara made a discovery that would change everything. She had been going through old household expense reports, trying to account for every naira in preparation for her legal defense, when she noticed something odd. Phone bills for a number she didn't recognize, charged to the household account. The number had been making calls to journalists, lawyers involved in cases against her family, and most damning, to Alhaji Musa's office. With trembling hands, Amara traced the number. It belonged to a device that had been purchased with household funds and registered under a false name. But the purchasing signature on the receipt was unmistakable. It was hers, or rather, a very good forgery of her signature. Amara's mind raced. Who had access to her signature? Who had been in the house throughout all these disasters? Who remained calm while everything burned? Grace. That evening, while Grace was out grocery shopping, Amara did something she had never done before. She searched Grace's room. What she found made her blood run cold. Hidden beneath the mattress was a laptop, several phones, and a folder thick with documents. Inside were photocopies of family documents, printed emails, photographs of Chief Okafor's business papers, and most chilling, a handwritten journal detailing every step of Grace's plan. The journal entries were methodical, almost clinical. Phase 1. Gain complete trust. Status: complete. Phase 2. Isolate and gather intelligence. Status: complete. Phase 3. Systematic destruction. Status: in progress. But it was the final entry that made Amara's heart stop. Phase 4. The final revelation. Make them understand why. Amara's hands shook as she read through the journal. Grace had orchestrated everything. The business fallout, Chidi's arrest, the charity fraud allegations. But why? The answer was in the journal's first page, written in neat handwriting. For my sister Patience, they will pay for what they did to you. Patience, the previous housemaid. But Amara had maintained a good relationship with Patience. She had sent her off with full salary and even additional money for her mother's burial. What could she possibly have done to warrant this revenge? Amara kept reading, and the truth emerged like a nightmare. Patience had not left to attend her mother's burial. She had been fired by Chief Okafor after he got her pregnant. The chief, in a moment of weakness during one of his wife's trips abroad, had taken advantage of the young woman. When Patience revealed her pregnancy, Chief Okafor had given her money to handle it and sent her away with threats of what would happen if she ever spoke about it. Patience had returned to her village in shame, had the abortion, and fell into a severe depression. 3 months later, she took her own life. Grace, her older sister, had found Patience's diary detailing everything that had happened in the Okafor household. The journal in Amara's hands was Grace's promise to her dead sister. I will make them feel the pain you felt. I will take everything from them, just as they took everything from you. They will know what it means to lose everything. Amara felt the room spinning. Her husband had betrayed her, assaulted their employee, and driven a young woman to suicide. And now, that woman's sister had systematically destroyed their lives in revenge. But the horror wasn't over yet. Grace returned home to find Amara waiting in the living room, the journal and documents spread out on the coffee table. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Grace smiled. Not the warm, subservient smile she'd worn for months, but something cold and triumphant. You found it? Grace said simply. Good. I wanted you to understand before the end. Before the end? Amara's voice was barely a whisper. What more could you possibly do to us? Grace's smile widened. Mrs. Okafor, everything that's happened so far has been preparation. The business losses, the legal troubles, the public shame. Those were just to break you down, to isolate you from your support systems. The real punishment begins now. She pulled out her phone and pressed a button. Within seconds, Amara's own phone began buzzing with notifications. Then Chief Okafor's. Then the house phone started ringing. Grace had just released everything to the media. Audio recordings of Chief Okafor admitting what he did to patients, forged documents proving the family's involvement in various schemes, and most devastating video evidence she had collected of the family's private moments that contradicted their public image. But there was more. Grace had also sent a comprehensive file to the police. Real evidence of actual crimes that Chief Okafor had committed over the years, things Grace had discovered during her months of careful investigation. Tax evasion, bribery, land fraud. While she had framed Chidi and falsely accused Amara to create chaos, the evidence against Chief Okafor was genuine. Your husband is a monster, Grace said calmly. He destroyed my sister, and he's been destroying others for years. I made sure everyone knows now. The difference is, unlike the false charges against your son and the fabricated scandal around your charity, which you'll eventually be able to disprove, your husband's crimes are real. He's going to prison, Mrs. Okafor, and your family name is destroyed forever. Amara felt tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. I never knew what he did to your sister. Please, you've hurt me, hurt my children who are innocent. Innocent? Grace's voice turned sharp. Your son Chidi knew about girls his father brought home when you traveled. He covered for him. You want to talk about innocent? My sister was innocent. She was 19 years old, trying to earn money for her education. Your husband took advantage of her vulnerability, threw money at her to kill her baby, and discarded her like garbage. You all lived in luxury built on the suffering of people like my sister. The confrontation was interrupted by sirens. Grace had timed everything perfectly. The police arrived simultaneously with the media, creating a circus outside the Okafor mansion. Chief Okafor was arrested that night, led out in handcuffs while cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Grace walked out the front gate without looking back, her mission complete. She had brought down the entire Okafor family, not with violence, but with patience, intelligence, and meticulous planning. The aftermath was devastating. Chief Okafor was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The real estate empire collapsed. Assets were seized to pay back defrauded victims. Chidi's charges were eventually dropped when Grace's manipulation was exposed. But the experience left him broken. He struggled with substance abuse and paranoia, unable to trust anyone. Ngozi, the daughter studying abroad, cut off contact with the family entirely, changing her name to escape the scandal. Amara lost everything, her marriage, her reputation, her charity work, and most of her wealth. She and young Emeka moved to a modest apartment in Surulere, far from the mansion that had been their home. Emeka, who had trusted and loved Auntie Grace, was perhaps the most damaged. The betrayal shattered something fundamental in him. He withdrew from the world, struggling to understand how someone he cared about could hurt his family so completely. Grace was eventually arrested for fraud, forgery, and other charges related to her scheme. During her trial, she showed no remorse. I did what the law wouldn't do, she told the court. I gave my sister justice. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison, but even from behind bars, she maintained that she would do it all again. The Okafor case became a cautionary tale discussed in Lagos, drawing rooms, and beyond. It raised uncomfortable questions about justice, revenge, and the hidden darkness in seemingly perfect families. Some sympathized with Grace, arguing that Chief Okafor had escaped accountability for too long. Others condemned her methods, pointing out that she had hurt innocent people in her quest for vengeance. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire story is this. Grace had access to the Okafor family's lives for 9 months. 9 months of sleeping under their roof, eating their food, caring for their child. And throughout it all, she was methodically planning their destruction. The trust that families place in household staff, the vulnerability of letting someone into your most private spaces. Grace weaponized all of it. Years later, Amara would give a single interview about the experience. "I lost everything," she said, her voice tired but steady. "My marriage, my home, my reputation. But the worst part is knowing that my husband's actions set all of this in motion. He victimized a young girl, and his sin came back to consume us all. Grace was wrong to do what she did, but Raymond gave her the weapon she used against us." Today, the Okafor mansion still stands in Lekki, but it's owned by someone else now. Chief Okafor is still in prison. Amara works as a consultant for small NGOs, trying to rebuild her life and provide for Emeka, who is now a teenager struggling with trust issues and depression. Chidi lives somewhere in Ghana, having left Nigeria to escape his past. And Ngozi, the daughter who escaped the worst of the scandal, sends money occasionally but refuses to visit or reconnect with what remains of her family. Grace sits in a prison cell in Kirikiri, where she reportedly spends her time reading and mentoring younger inmates. Guards say she's a model prisoner, quiet and respectful. But sometimes, late at night, they hear her talking to someone who isn't there, calling a name softly, Patience. This story should make us all think. It's a reminder that our actions have consequences that ripple outward in ways we cannot predict. Chief Okafor's moment of weakness and cruelty toward a vulnerable young woman destroyed not just that woman, but eventually his entire family and the woman who sought revenge. Grace's need for vengeance, however justified she felt it was, led to her own incarceration and hurt innocent people who had nothing to do with her sister's tragedy. In the end, everyone lost. There were no winners in this story, only varying degrees of destruction. The housemaid who brought down an entire family succeeded in her mission, but the cost was paid by everyone involved, including herself. If this story shocked you, if it made you think about trust, consequences, and the hidden dynamics in our homes and society, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Share this video, because these are the real stories that need to be told, the ones that show us uncomfortable truths about justice, revenge, and the price of our actions. And let me know in the comments, do you think Grace was justified? Or did she become the very monster she was fighting against? Subscribe now, because there are more stories like this one. Stories that will challenge everything you think you know about right and wrong.